coming in from Philly, Anaconda or Ann. Pagtaas naman ng daily minimum wage ang hiling, sabi niya, wish ko lang ay mas lumiit ang living in poverty and below poverty. Sino raw ba ang may kayang mabuhay sa halagang higit kumulang 500 pesos lang sa isang araw? Another comment from Twitter, this one from Crooper Forever. Ang sinasabi nga pangarap niya na makaahon sa kahirapan ang mga Pilipino at maging mulat sa pananamantala ng mga mapang-abusong mga politiko. Now from Twitter, let's move on over to our Instagram pages. Zone 28, sino man daw ang manalo, sana gumawa ng paraan o i-push ang pagbaba ng presyo ng bilihin dahil napakamahal daw ng cost of living sa bansa kumpara sa mga yung kanyang gusto, yung confident, yung pangarap niya para sa sambayan ng Pilipino. Yung confident na raw, lumakad-lakad sa labas na hindi natatakot, better transportation, at syempre, quality of life. At yan, komento ng ating mga netizens. Join our online conversations using the hashtag #TheFilipinoVotes. Back to you, Pinky.
Thanks a lot, Manchu. Our Melissa Lopez joins us from the Philippine International Convention Center, or PICC, for the complex canvassing of votes. Melissa, what's happening there now?
Pinky, right now we are seeing the arrival of delegates coming from various groups. So we have representatives of parties, of political parties and candidates, and as well as international observers, mostly coming from the diplomatic corps. Now, the rules of the complex state that at 3 p.m. today, that was a few moments ago, the 7-member COMELEC and BAC should have already convened as the National Board of Canvassers. Now we're seeing last-minute preparations behind me. Earlier, just before we went to air, a chorale was serenading the guests as everyone is settling down. It's gonna be a long wait until after the polls close at 7 p.m. since the National Board of Canvassers still counting a vote.
Mel, so they're there, liwanagan tayong lahat. So what's going to happen, Mel? Na ba sila? I know you explained that a while ago, pero ulitin lang natin para, kasi meron tayong PPCRV at ano mangyayari.
But we expect na hindi muna sila makakita ng masyadong action dito dahil hihintayin kasi natin na pumasok lahat ng isa-isa pa, isa-isa yan, yung certificates of canvass, na yun kasi yung formal na pagbabasihan ng official tally para magdeklara ng mga winning candidates sa 2022 elections. So, ang mangyayari kasi dyan, magbibilang ang balo ang mga makina sa presinto, and then that will be transmitted through the servers of COMELEC, a specific process that needs to be followed by the National Board of Canvassers, that's the COMELEC and BAC, before they can actually declare the winner. So, more or less, malalaman natin sino yung leading. Pero it's the COMELEC which has the authority to declare the Senate and party list race winners. Sa Congress naman, that would be...
Okay, maraming salamat, Melissa Lopez, for the update. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. 333,000 are expected national election in this city. The city has a total number of 638 precincts. As early as 6 in the morning, some Bulgarians were already lining up in the different polling places, braving heavy rain just to exercise their right of suffrage. As of this reporting, the rain has stopped, but persistent problems with the COMELEC system still persist. Reports of names not found in the voters' list, unable to vote despite of the document, the active VTMs were just among the complaints heard by some voters. The conduct of the election still considered generally peaceful and orderly, thus precluding the conduct of the elections. Although there was a reported case of shooting, but police investigators are still digging deeper into the case to determine whether the case is a personal grudge or election-related. But filed a written complaint against a reporter and the outfit for election violation. According to COMELEC Register Attorney Stephen Roy Cañete, the reporter took a picture of a shaded ballot and posted the same on the FB page of the media outfit. The outfit has taken down the post after receiving the written warning from the COMELEC. As voters troop to polling places, the city government, through the City Health Office, continues its vaccination today with one vaccination site often catering to walk-in adults 18 years and above for first, second, and booster doses. The same vaccination site caters to 5 to 11 years old for first and second doses. The city has reported 92% fully vaccinated individual as of May dose. Reporting for CNN Philippine, Cecil Aboy, RPN, Visual Zamboanga City.
Cecil Aboy of RPN, DXXX Zamboanga, and I'm going to speak again to sociologist Nicole Curato and former presidential spokesperson and political consultant Edwin Lacerda. We still have a lot to talk about. So, Nicole wanted to talk about the youth vote. What is, ano bang bracket ng youth vote? But we all, I just want to say this now that the 18 to 19 voters for this election numbers almost 2.8 million. Madami sila. Ano ba ang youth vote?
Right. Well, if we look at Pulse Asia, looking at 18 years old to 24, and then if we want to be a bit more generous, 25 to 44. And I think what's surprising based on the Pulse Asia data is that with a category of 18 to 24s, 71% are voting for Bongbong Marcos Jr. Of course, for some people, this raises alarm bells, but for other people, they would probably contest this. Because if we think about what the youth are concerned with, what issues they care about, it's very diverse, right? Hindi naman isang category lang yung youth na pag sinabing youth, education lang yung pake nila. I mean, it's more diverse. Some care about climate change, some care about
Advantageous. Advantageous or disadvantageous?
I think it's a mix of both. Some would say, for example, that this generation grew up in the echo chamber generation, right? So this is the generation na nakuha nilang information nila from micro-targeted information that they get on Facebook and now on TikTok. But again, like what I said a while ago, this is also a self-aware generation. Hindi lang sila nagpo-consume ng information. Kaya rin nilang mag-produce ng information when they create content. So I think before we panic na bakit ganito mag-isip yung mga kabataan ngayon, bakit sobra silang biased for a particular candidate, hindi ba dapat mas diverse yung preferences nila? I think the point there is we also need to unpack the kinds of issues that young people carry. Parang hindi pa masyadong clear what they represent.
So, ulitin natin yun eh, with 18 to 24 years old, numbers about 11 million. Tama na, Nicole?
We have to check that.
Yeah, so here, I have it. This is from the COMELEC election records. 18 to 19 is around 2.8 million. 20 to 24 is 8.6 million. So that's 2.8 plus 8.6. That's almost, well, if I'm not mistaken, 11.6 maybe. Medyo malaki to na mga botante. Yung first-time voters ba, Edwin, is that a lot at 2.8 million? Historically.
Kasi you have to look at it every year kasi nag-register ka. But ganito yun eh, if you're, let's say you're 18 years old, 2003, maybe you're 90 or 19 ka or 18 or 17, but second one. Every year kasi yan, at a given year, you have a population count. And if you know the birth rate, you can more or less project.
Yeah.
Let's say, in 2003, let's say we're 80 million, so you have a 2% population birth rate. So you can count that year 1.6. So kung 2% siya, 1.6, 1.6, so may 4.8 ka every 3 years na pumapasok. Now, that's assuming everybody will register. The thing that even COMELEC admits na parang ang laki nang nag-register ng youth vote ngayon. Kasi nga siguro nga naging existential ang tingin nila dito sa election na to eh.
Actually, yun yung tanong ko eh, because I wanted to know if this was a big number or I'm comparing it to there really just a lot of first-time voters who went out and registered. That's the comparison I wanted to make when I was asking you, mas ba itong Malaki ba tong 2.8 million?
If you recall,
madami.
Comelec, ang sabi ng Comelec, malaki eh. I mean, they're the repository of all this information. So mukhang, if I remember, they mentioned na malaki ang nag-register ng youth vote. But also, marami rin nag-register first time na hindi na youth din. Or at least nag-renew ng kanilang registration. Maraming ganun eh.
Inactivate nila ulit.
Inactivate nila ulit because na, ibang, after 6 years after 2 years of pandemic, talagang parang pagod na sila. They want, ito yung tinatawag na change, di ba? Gusto namin ng pagbabago kasi pagod na kami sa pandemya, pagod na kami sa hirap ng buhay. So, ito yung pumapasok na we need to have a change.
But also very telling here, Nicole and Edwin, it's the 60 and above. Di ba ang senior citizen, 60? Tama ba? 60 and above, no? Not 65. 60 and above. 65 pala retirement age. So 60 and above, registered voters is at 10 million. 10.2 million, which represents about 16% of votes. Malaki yan. I'll go to the next one in terms of yung pinakamaraming botante. 60 and above is 10 million. 25 to 29 is 8.6 million voters. Ano bang mindset, Nicole and Edwin, ng mga 60 and above? I mean, in terms of voting, obviously awareness, you're obviously older, and comparing that to what, first-time voter of about 2.8 million. Nicole, go ahead. How's the profile? Or is that not your needs of millennials?
Malapit naman na maging senior yung mga millennials. I mean, there are aging millennials as well, like myself. But correct me if I'm wrong. But the understanding is that voting in the Philippines is not really determined by the demographic criteria of age. It's often determined by baluarte. People vote for candidates from the same region. And in the case of the 2022 election, one study actually revealed that the view of Marcos Sr. is predictive of voting behavior, meaning how people perceive the late dictator is predictive of how they will vote in this election across the board yan. So I think while it's also important to profile the boomers and the Gen Zs and millennials as voters, I think I also recognize na maraming indicators for voting preferences are medyo across the board siya.
Edwin, what about
But
it?
if you remember also, tama rin, pag nabasa mo yung sa Pulse Asia survey, it's a 60 and above na medyo mas anti-bongbong. Because pinagdaanan yung panahon na martial law. So, although malaki pa rin yung boto kay Bongbong, pero ito yung predominantly na mas lamang ang mga anti-Bongbong. Because dumaan sila sa martial law. Kaya yung mga bata ngayon, it's one generation apart. Diba? They grew up in social media, like what Nicole said. So talagang, at that time, like I was telling before, 2010, nung nasa gobyerno kami, nakita na namin yung rehabilitation, restoration ni Marcos sa YouTube, tahimik, it's so quiet. Below the radar, but they were putting out Marcos restoration. And it was Manolo Quezon who told me, did you see this? Who's gonna believe that? Ako syempre, I went through martial law, we went through EDSA, so my own perception was, nobody's gonna believe that. How wrong was I to realize that the younger ones who have no concept of martial law, who have never been exposed to the Marcos difficult years, had a different notion of Marcos.
Let's talk about, before we forget, Google Trends. Please explain this to us. So, it was said that Google Trends actually predicted leadership in Southeast Asian countries such as Malaysia, Singapore, and the Philippines. So, if I still have my numbers right, Google Trends, you have a 57% Lenny and a 23% Bongbong Marcos. My question is, ano po ba talaga ang value ng Google Trends compared to, I'll just go straight to the point, a survey like Pulse Asia?
On Google Trends, it's really assuming it's a search. Its search is basically you want to know who this fellow is. Lenny Robredo, Bongbong Marcos, Isko Moreno. So you search. So my understanding, it aggregates all the search. So it aggregates all the searches for Lenny, but searches in and of itself are sentiment agnostic. So whatever, if you type Lenny Robredo, you don't know what's going to come up.
You don't know if it's for Lenny or against Lenny.
Or all of them will come up.
Yeah.
So we don't know, and there's really nothing there to say that it is for or against. But some people would a particular firm would rate, for instance, for instance, Facebook, engagement as preference. If you, let's say, you nag-like ka, click mo yung natatawa, yung smile, that's viewed as preference, conversion na yan.
Yeah.
Conversion na yan. So, it depends on the rules that you provide for the AI. And then the AI will just aggregate it in accordance to the rules that the algorithm that you've crafted. So yung methodology na is based on the AI rules that you craft. Pag ang Google search naman talaga, it's very aggregated yan. It's anonymized, it's big data. It doesn't distinguish a unique user. Let's say if Nicole can search
Nicole can search 1,000 times.
1,000 times, it will be aggregated. It's no respecter of how many times.
Exactly.
It's no respecter
Nicole
of
Corato's not just one.
Yes.
It wasn't just one search of one Nicole
It
Corato.
also
It's
does
1,000
not,
searches
you know,
of
I
the same
try to
Nicole.
look for, let's say, can we go granular? Can we do a deep dive, for instance? If someone was searching, can we go province? Yes. Can we go region, province? Yes. And I ask, can we go a street level? Hindi kaya. Hindi kaya yung, because kung sa street level, let's say sa Manila, kung maghahanap ang isang tao na galing Tondo, alam mo ang social class nito. Kasi ang binabangga mo naman sa survey, meron sa ABCDE. So more or less, alam natin kung bakit ganito ang distinction. So sa Google, wala eh.
What about you, Nicole?
I will
Help
just-
us understand
Yeah, I
this.
will just affirm what was mentioned. Google Trends actually reflect what people are interested in, but we don't know the sentiment associated to that interest. But I'm also happy to be proven wrong, just to see how it affects, or not really affects, but how it reflects the outcome of the election. I think my partiality here is to blend survey data with Google Trends and see how they speak to each other. Some people tried to attempt that, but these are still very preliminary studies.
It's too new, to be even able to do that, because there are some people who believe that because Google Trends is saying this is the predominantly more accurate siguro data compared to Pulse Asia.
Pero
To that you say, let's be direct, to that you say that's wrong, Edwin?
I've never viewed, even Google Trends in their FAQ say that they're not a pollcaster. So that's where I'm looking at it. I've never used Google Trends as a predictor of votes. And the other thing, by the way, but while Google Trends and surveys are being used in other countries, is this the only country na ang layo, iba ang results? Lahat consistent sila, aligned sila, pero dito baliktad. So, yun ang magandang tingnan, bakit?
Okay, I just have one last question. We only have a minute left. Nicole, just siguro final words, how important this election is and what we should do after whoever it is wins.
So I always say in my interviews that it's not an overstatement to say that whoever will win the presidency is the person who will decide who lives or who dies in this country. This president will decide if Tokhang will continue. This president will decide our climate policy. This person will decide how we respond to disasters and how we respond to COVID. So literally, this person will decide who lives and who dies. And this is why it's the most consequential election, I think, in my lifetime.
Edwin.
I think itong election na ito, nabuhay yung civic-mindedness ng mga mamamayan. Naging mas buhay, naging mas passionate, mas naging aware sila. Siguro dapat ipagpatuloy ito because we need to let the people always speak truth to power, not just media. But kung may mali, dapat punahin ang taong bayan. Kung tama, purihin. Dapat kailangan aktibo tayo sa political involvement natin.
All right, thank you so much. Excuse me for joining us.